take some of the stuff off the table? Do you mind if I take like the wallet? The phones are fine. Are you supposed the mask? Oh, yeah. Just the cups are good. The cups are fine.
Oh.
Sponsored by Dunkin' Donuts. Sponsored.
It's all me.
Yeah, it's right now.
Alright. I'm giving my cups.
Don't get
There
recording.
we go.
We're chatting.
Ready?
Alright, here we go. Alright, everyone. Hello, and welcome back to the second episode of the Say It With Your Chest podcast. My name is Sade.
And I'm Kelly.
And today we are joined with Jill, Michael, Erin, and Louisa to talk about white allyship.
And just to get to the nitty-gritty of it, Jill, do you want to introduce yourself with your name and class year, and then you guys can go on from there.
I'm Jillian Hansen. I'm a criminology and sociology double major.
I'm Michael. I'm a sophomore healthcare administration major.
I'm Erin, a sophomore psychology major and crim minor.
Hi, I'm Louisa, and I'm a senior double majoring in education studies and environmental studies.
Awesome. So to get started, we're going to start in sort of an uncomfortable place. I think maybe not for you guys, because you guys are comfortable with having conversations about race, but just for other people in the audience that might be watching. Can you tell us a little bit about when you realized that you were white? Does that make sense? Because I didn't realize this until I think a couple of weeks ago. In the same way that when I was like a little girl and I was like, oh shit, like I'm black. Oh my god, like this is my reality. I didn't realize that white people actually go through the same thing. So if anyone wants to hop in and start.
So, the first thing I think about, and this is how this shows you how much education kind of is so whitewashed and identity really isn't acknowledged. The first time I realized I was white was when I realized someone wasn't white. My friend, her dad was from Mexico, both her parents were from Mexico, and she told me she spoke Spanish at home, and I was like, oh my god, like, that's amazing. Like, I was so stunned by that. And this was in middle school, probably 8th grade, which is very, very late. You know, but I grew up in a predominantly white area, so it was common, I guess.
Yeah, understandable.
Yeah, mine's definitely similar to Jill's. It's that moment when I was realizing that, like, it was me realizing someone else wasn't. And, like, that whole kind of, like, mind shift first moment where, like, I never looked down at my skin and was like, oh, I'm white. Like, I just didn't. I didn't think of that. And so similar to Jill's, I remember we were in a history class, and I think we were learning about Emmett Till, and someone made a comment in the room about, like, the one woman of color in the room. And that was really hard because the teacher didn't even know how to handle it.
Yeah.
That was definitely my first.
I personally think I've had a completely different experience. Instead of realizing other people were different, I realized that I myself was white. I definitely grew up in like a predominantly white neighborhood, but I'd say it was around 6th, 7th grade, and I just kind of realized like everyone was different, not necessarily white and black, or like white, whatever the heck. But yeah, I think it was different. Like I was like, oh, I'm white, cool.
So for like my story about how I realized I was white, both my brother and I are adopted. I actually look a lot like my dad. We both have the same color eyes and like very similar nose shape. And then my brother, I'm from Russia and he's from Latvia. However, he like does not look at anything like my parents. He has like especially in the summer, like he has a darker skin tone. So like it was just like really like watching my brother like go through that. Like he wouldn't go out in the sun in the summer, and he would like feel really like I would just listen to him and he'd feel like very kind of uncomfortable walking around with just my mom and him and I, and just like hearing his story and like how like I was so like proud of my adoption story and like where like I came from, but it was so much harder for him, and he really felt like he had to mold in himself to everyone around us. So I realized from like a young age, like both my brother and I have very different stories with our adoption.
Yeah, that's so cool. I feel like that all has to do with like the first podcast that we spoke is just like that maturity of being able to realize that. Because you guys, you know how everyone's saying they see it in like middle school, almost going into high school. I feel like that's something really hard to see at a young age, because at a young age, like a kindergartner can't tell you what black and white is, you know what I mean? So I think getting to that age where you can kind of realize you're different is really important. But I feel like sometimes people miss it, both black and white. Like, they don't really notice it. And I think that's where it causes that type of confusion when it comes to being at a college or being at a predominantly white institution where it's just like, hey, you really need to understand the differences and being able to have conversations and I don't know, I think because like these meaningful conversations lead to so much more clarity and unity and it's just like meaningful and I feel like sometimes we don't have them enough, you know?
I agree, and I think it's that those conversations and those realizations and being open and transparent about those things is where we start the relationship between Black people and white people specifically in terms of allies. I think that's something that I want to lean in a little closer to. I don't know if you can like pinpoint something and be like, yes, this is how I am an ally today. But like, I think a better question is, what is allyship to you? And how do you, as a white person, as you operate in the world, how do you utilize yourself as an ally?
I think about this all the time actually because I always like, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I always like try to better myself in the conversation because obviously I am white. I don't know what y'all go through, like, and I could try, but I'm never really gonna know. So I like try to ask myself like what, like just what you said daily. I do try to think about that, like what could I do, like daily to help, and I think that's what allyship like really means to me. Is just what can I do as a friend, or what can I do just as someone passing. Like if I hear something, I should say something because no one else is going to, and even if they do, I should still say something.
Exactly.
I think allyship just means not being a bystander. Like if you're not actively being anti-racist, I don't think you should be allowed to say you're an ally.
Exactly.
I like that. Yeah.
And I feel like kind of similar to that is I know a big part for me, and I don't know if this is because I work with children at home, so teaching just like something that is like part of my nature, but education is one of like my biggest parts, and being one of the co-coordinators for Whites Becoming Allies, it's a big part that I send out every other week. You know, we send out articles for everyone to like read through and like get familiar with a topic before we talk about it. And then from there on out, that's when you can facilitate conversations better. And you know, when there's moments that happen where you're like, okay, I need to speak up. You're going to be well versed and you're going to know what you're talking about.
Right.
I also think like a lot of like shifting the mindset of allyship is like when you start to have more and more of those moments where you realize something's wrong, and it's like a different feeling than when you were growing up and knowing that that was wrong to say and not knowing what to do about it, and then actually knowing why it's not okay to say. Because I think I didn't realize until college why these things were so problematic, why the language you're using is so important, and so I think allyship came more into like being able to step up and actually say like stop to someone, and it's hard.
That's big. That goes back to the emotional maturity that we were talking about.
Going off of that point too, I think this is like a situation that happened like very recently, and in terms of like Alex, like a situation happened, I needed to like file a bias incident report. It was like and I was kind of like in this space of like I don't know why I was like doubting myself. I was like I don't maybe I interpreted something wrong, or like coming and trying to find other like allies as well, and like creating this space of like, okay, so what happened, and like what did you see, what did you hear, and like trying to find others who like share those common values, I think is like just so important, so like important in my own growths. And then also like after the incident happened, I kind of just sat down and like journaled about it, and so that really helped me to like figure out different ways of like processing, like when an incident takes place, or like just in day-to-day like activities, like what are ways that like you can really like internalize the things that go on around you, how can you and use them all as like, even if it's a mistake you made, like use it as this opportunity for growth and for like continually bettering yourself.
I like how you use the journal almost like as an outlet, like, because I feel like being an ally, you see so much, it's a lot, especially like when I feel like, especially, I don't want to say that transfer into it, but once you notice you're white, and then once you notice like, okay, this is what I have to do, or like this is what I feel like is the need to do, like I feel like having an outlet is so crazy, because like we were talking about earlier, like mental health is nuts nowadays, so it's just like I think that's cool, like the journal, just let everything out there, because you're not being judged, you're not being you're just letting it all out. So I really like that.
Right. And I was gonna say, like, sometimes like when you first start getting into allyship and anti-racist work, you're very, like, I know at least for myself, when I was like facilitating conversations, I find myself getting angry
Mm.
and losing patience with people. You know, I would like, and then I don't know if it's just as like a woman, but then you get upset and people don't take you seriously.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, you know, I feel like I blew this. So I feel like being able to process those feelings and approach conversations calmly because you understand how you
Yeah.
feel and you understand the concepts at a deeper level. I think that's so useful.
Oh, I respect that. I feel like that takes a lot of like self-awareness to be like, I gotta let this out here before I can let it out
Exactly.
there. Like, I like that.
Yeah, and I thought that feeling would be a little different because, like, in our notes and the things that we discussed on the topics that we wanted to talk about, one of the things that I had brought up was white guilt because I had just ignorantly assumed that when you're talking about issues like this, it feels like white people are always the butt of the joke whenever we talk about racism. And I said this in a class that I had. Really, it can't be helped because, like, that just happens to be the racial group that, like, chose to oppress people. But, like, at the same time, how do you cope with that and then fuel that, like, always being the butt of the joke, like, white people, like, always being the receiving end of that and still turning those emotions and those things into allyship and advocacy?
Oh, that's a good question.
I think that's really
That's a
admirable.
big,
Joke,
that's a
like,
passion.
being
There's a lot. There's a lot of like.
It's funny you say that because, like, literally tonight I was talking with my boyfriend, and those who don't know my boyfriend is Savion. He's the diversity chair, and you're in an interracial relationship. You know, I'm white and he is black, and I don't even know what we were talking about. I think we were talking about another student who's an ally, and like I was just, me and her recently had a conversation. I was like, wow, like I didn't know she was like that. She was really great to talk to, and he was like, well, it's like you both are good at like doing work with, especially with white guilt. And I was like, well, it's not as much as like guilt, but when you're on a campus with 2,500 people and about 2,300 of them aren't really like doing anything.
24/9.
Yeah, right. You kind of have to like, it's like no longer guilt. Sometimes it's more of like you gotta push because other people aren't.
I like that. Kind of use it as a drive in a sense.
I did that.
And it definitely popped into my head that last point, or 2 points ago that Jill was talking about, where she was talking about a scenario, and I thought of the first times I like witnessed someone say something to like my circle of friends who are people of color, and being like really angry in that moment, but I didn't say something, and I felt so bad that I didn't say something because I was so early on in like my learning experience about how to be an ally. And I think back on those moments of like how now like I just would never have thought of it in that way, but now I look back on that moment, I'm so angry that I wasn't able to say something then. And so like I think when people start to witness that and see it and feel that emotion, and most of the time the person that is being aggressed or it's not even a word, but they shrug it off their shoulders and you see that pain like roll off of them. And I don't know, that's what motivates me at least.
That's weird. You know, like to piggyback off of that, I feel like this is my own like experience. Like when I go back at home, my friends are like, they'll crack jokes sometimes about white people, and I'm just like, you can't say that, like, you know. So it's just like I bet you guys have to go through the same things back at home too. And I'm not saying like your parents, but I've always wanted to know like how do you address those questions, even like with your parents or with friends back at home. 'Cause I feel like that's awkward because it's kind of like even when I'm at home with my friends, I'm like, oh, how do I tell them like you can't say that, like, you know? Like I just want to see like how you like, your perspective.
Talking about like being at the butt end of the joke all the time, honestly, like if you get upset about that, you're ruining the whole point. Like I'm straight up, you gotta deal with it, laugh it off.
Something I've heard once that if you get upset about it, then you're the people that
Exactly.
the joke. You know, like you're the one. You're the one that they're joking
Exactly.
about.
You're the purpose that people are making this joke, and honestly, most of the time it is pretty funny and pretty accurate. And just, I mean, sometimes it's like sometimes people say some things pretty out of pocket, but I mean, you really gotta let it roll off because I mean, not that I personally have ever like I don't think I've ever microaggressed anybody, and even if I have, like, hopefully
you definitely have. I've microaggressed.
Yeah, I mean, like,
I haven't said
like,
that.
even if I have, I was
unconscious.
gonna say, even if I have, I probably definitely have. You know, you just gotta deal with it and move on, because if you dwell on the joke, dwell on what you said, not saying like dwell on it like you have to learn from your mistakes and learn from what you said, but just if you dwell on it too much, then you're gonna get upset and you're ruining the point of being a white ally.
Yeah.
It's definitely a different thing too, like being at the butt of that joke where, yeah, you're these jokes are being made, but they're about things that white people can change, which is their words and their actions. And it's not that way with racism. It's literally something you cannot change. So why don't you lose the attitude and the jokes will stop.
Yeah.
Or,
Right, that's exactly it.
Yeah, I feel like that has a lot to do with what you're saying. Like also like as an educator. Is that as an educator, like it's been a long day. As an educator, I think it's important to. I feel like people don't understand. Like everyone has unconscious bias. Like without even noticing, you could spit something out and be like, "Oh wow!" Like I didn't even notice until someone brings it up to you. And I just feel like that has a lot to do with education. And I feel like sometimes we don't focus a lot on the education part as much as we do like the society part. But I feel like they should be evenly, because if you don't understand this part, you're not gonna understand this part.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And one thing that I also would like to talk about is in exploring race and like the cure to racism and things like that. I think I found a lot of tension between people of color disagreeing on whether or not fixing racism is a people of color problem or if it is a white person problem. Like I've heard the argument that's like I want autonomy. I want autonomy over my own freedom, and I want to be able to create my own place in the world. But at the same time, I don't want to have to fix a problem I didn't create. And sometimes it can get exhausting to be the person of color in a room that's always educating. But then, like you guys said, you're always educating. So where do you think you stand on that conversation?
Really quick, sorry, but going off Kelly's implicit like bias thing, if people watching this podcast don't think they have implicit bias, look up the IIT test and take
the Harvard test.
Take the Harvard implicit bias
I
test.
haven't even said that.
No, you will see.
thing.
Just take the test with no preconceived notions. Take it, and you will see everyone has implicit bias.
yes.
Just wanted to plug that. You can go ahead.
Oh my god, I totally lost my train of thought. Oh no, I remember. Glendy Alvarez, RRA, total queen, love
her.
Wendy.
Love
We
her.
Wendy. But I interviewed her recently as a local leader for my social movements class.
Cool.
And something she did say to me, she was like, because I asked her, I was like, what is your golden rule of thumb that you give to anybody who's starting out in social movements and social change? And she said, I can't remember who the quote is from, the last name's Lafayette, but she said that every person has a role in this movement regardless of what their gifts are.
Oh,
And
okay.
I just will always remember that, because like even talking about like, you know, when it becomes to tackling racism, using your privilege is one of the best things you can do to dismantle it.
Yeah.
So that is the role that you can fulfill as a white person tackling racism.
I like that.
I'm not sure if that answers the question, but
No, but it shows your perspective.
Yeah.
I like that. I agree.
That's what happened.
Yeah, I think. I mean, for me, I think it's a two-way street. Like, yeah, black people maybe didn't create racism, but I think even as a community, we have to be honest in saying that sometimes we sustain racism and that we don't even always treat one another the same way. So we have a lot of work to do in breaking down our internalized racism just as much as the people outside of it have to do to break it down.
Yeah. I
There's
definitely
always
agree
going to be that. Oh, sorry.
No,
There's always going to be that bridge too between both. Like you can't solve a problem without having that form of communication. So it's more of the balance of who's going to do the dirty work, who's going to really get in there with it, because you're always going to need feedback of BIPOC people to be understanding of what is going wrong and like firsthand, because we don't notice it. We walk by and those things, like they're so easy to slip over our head because they're not affecting us as white people.
Honestly, though, too, I think we need like people of color to pitch in, because otherwise, I honestly think white people as a whole aren't really going to do anything. I think there are select groups like us. I'm sure other people in the college have the same views or similar ones, and even across the world, we know, or not the world, Jesus.
Hey, the world.
I think just like white people as a whole in the United States aren't gonna give you guys what you need. Like as a whole, I don't think we have the majority, honestly, as like a whole, as like white people to like stop racism, and I think we need your help to see what we need to fix and how to help.
That's valuable. That's
Well,
valuable.
there's a sociological theory on that from W.E.B. Du Bois about the veil, that white people have that veil over them where they can't see racism when it's like obviously it's right in front of you, but since they don't experience it, they don't see it the same way. And so I think that is, I mean, Sorry, I'm like slowly being like an egghead and being like, well, there's actually a theory on it.
No, I'm like, Jillian,
That's just why I was thinking of.
Show your
You mentioned
references
that.
Yeah.
To jump off of that point too, I was also gonna say maybe it also depends on like the environment as well. So I was thinking about this in terms of like should it just be like why does it just need to be a white on white conversation or like Black people or any person of color like coming and sharing their story, like why can't those two merge? So I think like some of the most powerful like presentations or like lectures that I've ever been to are when those two voices are coming together. I think on like an off-campus anti-racism alliance that I'm part of, it's really cool because 1 week we'll have like this white on white conversation where it's like unpacking biases, reading different things that go on and just kind of like understanding this white on white conversation.
Cool.
But then the next week we'll have like folks come in and like share their stories and share and like the audience is allowed to like form that conversation. So like why does it just need to be like one or the other? Like can those two merge and how do you do so successfully?
I love that.
Yeah, I think it's just like that uncomfortable. I think it's the fact that because they're still uncomfortable conversations, I personally don't understand. I mean, I understand, but don't understand at the same time. I'm just like, it's been so long, so let's just talk about it. But then it's also like, I completely get it because you're going to be more comfortable to say what you need to say around people who look like you, have the same experiences as you, and can relate to you. Like, you know what I mean? I always feel like, oh, I don't want to offend nobody, so people shy down. Whereas just like, I feel like the main reason why these conversations are so separated in a sense is because I think it's a comfort thing. But I feel like to have these conversations, you have to be open-minded, and you can't have your feelings in it because how are we really gonna speak and come to the conclusion of anything if you're gonna, you know, be in your bag the whole time and trying to talk?
That's a really big part of allyship that we talk about in Whites Becoming Allies is you need to lower the defense.
Yeah.
Because the moment when someone calls you out on something, our automatic response, regardless of what it is, you're going to be defense. Like, you're going to defend yourself. But you got to lower the defense and take a moment for self-reflection. Because if you have your guard up, you're not going to learn anything.
I agree. I think those are... Oh, go ahead.
I was also going to say, like, this was an instance that happened just a few weeks ago. Like, I made, like, a mistake to one of my good friends, and, like, well, of course, I always, like, journal everything that, like, happened, so I went back to the library and just I actually wrote a letter to my friend, and I said, this is what I did. I, like, accidentally called, like, a different one of our friends, like, his name, so basically I was just like, oh, here's what I did, and my friend, like, said it was totally fine, but I knew, like, just with everything going on in the Asian American community, I just felt so bad for like making that mistake, and so I sat down, wrote this letter to him, and like then I like went back afterwards, and like it was like just this moment of like, okay, like this is me stepping down and saying like this is what I did, and like I'm sorry, and like this is my pride, and like you have to almost push that pride aside and say, okay, like this is what I did, but I'm like ready to move forward. I made like a 3-step plan of like what I can continue to do to like to check myself and continually like move forward. So like making that plan.
Accountability.
No, I respect that so much because I really never, I don't think until college, literally understood the power of someone's name. Like that's their identity. Like, you know what I mean? Because there'd be times that I mess up people's names and I'm like, it's not that big of a deal.
Exactly.
But then like coming to school, I was like, why did she take offense to that? And then someone told me, like had a conversation with me, and I was like, I've never thought of that in some way because that's their identity. Like that's what makes them who they are. Like, you know what I mean? So I respect that so much because it took me so long to understand. And I'm still, even when I mess people's names up sometimes, I don't even recognize it, and I walk away and I'm like, I didn't mean to call you. Like, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, that's also a 21st century thing because I think if you even think about it in the context of our country, the amount of erasure that happened just in terms of names, and to see like how deep-seated and how real and alive the problem of racism is, even that in messing up someone's name, I could be perpetuating centuries and centuries of oppression, like stuff like that. It's hard stuff to deal with, and it takes a lot of work, but I think that you guys are doing a really good job.
Props to y'all.
Yeah, that being said, I think that we've had a pretty decent conversation.
Really quick about the name thing, I also have to say, if you don't know how to pronounce someone's name, just ask.
Simple.
Because if you simple. Like instead of messing it up, just ask. Like I'm gonna be so honest, I forgot your name for the first 2 months last year. No clue. And no, I'm being so serious.
She butchered my name for the longest time.
It was so bad.
And I didn't want to say it because I knew if I said it, I didn't want to upset you, so I just waited until someone else said it. I was like, let's go.
That's the one.
And I last year, I would have never done this.
Mm.
I would have never have even offered to be on here or even
Yeah.
asked about it. And you have to be okay being uncomfortable. You also have to be okay being confused about things.
Yeah.
That's a
Because
good one.
I really don't know.
I mean,
like,
do we
a
all
lot.
know? Like,
So,
we all don't know.
I mean, like, it's okay to be lost. And
Yeah.
I think that's an important notion
Yeah.
for a lot of people
That's
on
a good
campus.
one.
And like that's how you build deep conversations,
Exactly.
deep friendships. I feel like having these conversations, how you really connect with one another. Because I'm not saying like we're not friends, like we are, like we're in the same group, we're in the same
Yeah,
class,
yeah.
like most of us. But I already feel like even after this conversation, I'm gonna connect with each one of you guys even more.
Yeah.
And not even just because of this conversation, but just because we had an uncomfortable conversation, and I think it just brings you a little more. I don't know. I just feel like the vibe be
I know
different
what you're
after.
saying.
You know what I mean?
I know what you're saying.
And it's really good when you can have those conversations without needing to plan them. Like I remember last year, I sat in like the lounge chairs area, and the guy who used to work at Gigi's, oh god, speaking of names, I forget his name, Brian.
Yes, Brian.
Yeah.
Oh, what
Yeah.
a great.
I don't
Brian
remember. I don't
left.
remember. But I sat down in there, and Taj and Marnie sat down. I think I don't remember who else was there. Sorry, Rip.
It's
But we had like a whole talk, and he looked at me at one point, and he was like, "Oh, like you as the only white person in this conversation, like what's your outlook on this?" And I was like, "Oh, what?" Like I wasn't talking. I wasn't really engaging at first. I was just actively listening, like so, just like what is happening. So when he asked me that, like I was like, and just let it all out, and he was like okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's an important point, though, too, to know when to talk and when to listen, especially in
For
certain
sure.
conversations, because I think certain times, like you should just listen, because, like, so I know some of the conversations me and Sade have, we talk, I probably would say, every time we hang out, we probably have a conversation about a topic like this, and I think that's definitely helped our friendship.
For sure.
Number one, and number two, I think it's really important, and a good skill to learn is when to listen and when to comfort and when to just say something in reassurance or just speak your mind. Because I think every situation is different, and I think
Exactly.
certain situations, if you speak your mind, I think it's not the greatest call. But yeah.
Yeah, and I think just a point to wrap it all in is to remember that people are like hungry for these conversations. So I know that it might be scary as a white person who might not really know your place in fixing racism right now. It might be scary to initiate that conversation, but the feeling of relief that I get when a white person is finally willing to sit down and start opening up the conversation, I think it doesn't erase all the racism that I felt in my life, and it doesn't ease the pain of the fight that we're fighting, but it's a
Feel
breath
seen.
of fresh
It's a good
air.
step.
Exactly. You
feel
feel seen. You feel seen, and the more that you have these conversations, I think as a white person, the more you'll realize that the entire anti-racist community, or whatever the fuck we want to call it, whatever the heck we want to call it, I think it's all family, and it's all about everyone pushing and pulling each other, and we're growing and we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah,
So thank you guys. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry you guys came.
Me too. This was a good
This was
one.
great.
This was a good one. We're gonna music it out. Are you ready? Here we go. That's great. That's great.